all of your stories, all of your wonderful quirks, all of your wild madness, that isn't owned by anybody else, nor can they take it away from you, nor should we let them. So really, let that be your starting point. That's a quote from my guest, Bee Higgins, who is talking about tapping into your lovely, unique magic when it comes to writing. And she's so real about this whole writing malarkey. She's a brilliant writer. She helps people with their copywriting, their blog, their website copy, or whatever kind of creative writing they want to explore. But she still gets vulnerable about it. She still looks at a blank page and thinks, I can't write, because she's very human. So welcome to this episode to help you breathe life into your writing. I'm Trisha Lewis and I'm the host of Self-Belief Unsquashed, and occasionally I have the joy of interviewing somebody, and that's what this episode is all about. The wonderful Bee Higgins. You'll have all her links around this episode. She basically is a writing mentor, but so much more than that, because she's so heart-led and believes in embracing imperfection, actually. That's quite important, isn't it? Intrigued? She's got some fabulous stories, some quite profound stories, and some very practical little strategies to help you on your writing journey. Right, I haven't done interviews for a while, Bee, so if I go all weird, please forgive me. I'm just used to blabbering on myself, but it's so nice that I'm not going to do much of that, because you are an absolute font of fabulousness when it comes to this question of writing. So, for instance, I'm sat here with a blank sheet of paper. Yeah. For me, it would be paper. We could discuss that probably for the next half hour. For some, it will be a blank doc on their screen. But whatever it is, I'm in freeze mode. So whether this is me wanting to just start a blog for my own creative hobby, whether it's me doing it for my business, I've just started up a business, or I want to refresh my business, or whether I just want to do some form of creative fiction writing, who the heck knows? It's writing, and it's finding our unique way of expressing ourselves. So I'm frozen, and I know, because of all the people you work with, that you will know why we tend to freeze at this stage. And I liked the fact that we had in common the word fibs. Yeah. And the way I use it is fibs that hold us back, fears, illusions, and baggage. So take it away, Bee, on all of that stuff that now holds us back at this blank stage phase.
Well, I am very happy to be here blathering with you. I mean, there's so much baggage we're bringing to that empty page, right? We're not just sort of turning up of a day and, we're fresh out the womb, and, we're coming to it with decades of stuff, with heads brimming with thoughts, with so much external sort of sensory stimulation. So it's no wonder that sometimes the blank page does seem like a lot, with a lot of the people that I tend to come into contact with. Some of them, someone said something about their writing 30 years ago, and they can tell me exactly what was said. And ever since then, it's been informing how they view themselves and how they view their self-expression. For other people, a lot of it does seem to be external stuff that then gets turned into internal stuff. It's other people saying you're too much or you're not enough. And that feeds into how you then present yourself, express yourself. Oh, I need to hold myself back a little bit here. Oh, I maybe shouldn't say this. I shouldn't do that. There's nothing special about what I would have to say anyway. Or then we go into like other realms of it. If it's in the business realm, for example, a lot of people can feel a bit stunted because there are others out there who build that lovely hierarchy and sit at the top and go, You lot don't know what you're doing. Me, on the other hand, on my yacht with my champagne, I know the one specific way you should be expressing yourself, and I will hand you 5 templates if you brush my palm with gold, you know? And so they're going to themselves, oh, well, anything I have to say wouldn't be valid because it wouldn't be met with a billion eyes and adoration and this, that, and the other. So there are so many things, so many reasons as to why that blank page feels extremely vulnerable, I think, extremely terrifying. And you know what? I feel that all of the time. Just because I'm a writer, it doesn't mean that like I'm like at one with the page. No, pretty much every single time I go to write something, I'm like, oh, but you're the worst writer in the world though, so maybe just don't.
I love that. I mean, because that is it. There's the same with all sorts of people's things that they do, and usually things that they're actually very good at, but they suddenly don't believe they are. That is perfectly put. I mean, it would be the same, say, for instance, in my past acting, I
Yeah.
could put together, I used to do one woman plays and one woman shows, and I could put a new one together and then be convinced that everyone was going to like throw tomatoes at me, walk out. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, how does she ever think she could act? This is yeah, so we will do that. So we probably have to accept, would you say we have to accept that those demons will come flying at us? Then I guess it's a matter of breathing and regaining some self-belief, which is kind of the name of this podcast. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean those all those things that you talk about. I mean, the baggage, what fears, illusions, baggage. So the fear that I'm not good enough, I'm not as good as they are, I'm not doing it the way I'm supposed to do, I'm going to be ridiculed,
Mhm.
etc., ignored, ridiculed, whichever is worst.
Mhm.
Illusions, the illusions that you so beautifully put, that you can do this with these 5 top tips of template,
Mhm.
or that a good writer has to be XXX, Virginia Woolf, or whoever it is that you're, thinking that you should be like. And yeah, or Simon Sinek, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's it. That's a good writer. Yes, I've got to be like that. And baggage, you beautifully put, that somebody told you something 30 years ago at
Yeah.
school, when you wrote your essay in year 2. It got a
Yeah.
bad mark.
And it's no wonder we hold on to this stuff, right? There's no judgment there for any of the stuff that we bring, you know. I I think that's the important thing is making space for all that stuff, being able to look at it and be like, wow, and not come with it with so much judgment like, oh, why am I still holding on to this thing that's whatever, Like we can really beat ourselves up about it. And I think that's so sad because it's like, yeah, this stuff can stick, You're human. That's okay.
You're human, and humans don't, I mean, you don't like to feel that you've, done something wrong or done something bad, or that
Mm.
you are going to be thrown out into the wilderness and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I remember when I went to uni as a mature student, so I was like 45 or whatever I was.
Hmm.
And I thought I was rather good at writing, and I'd written all these various plays, and got English A level and all that kind of malarkey. And yeah, and then I wrote my first uni essay, and it was pretty much torn apart by my
Yeah.
tutor, because of
Mm.
course it was a whole different world, and I had to be able to walk away from that and say, this doesn't mean that you're a terrible writer, you're a useless person. This just means,
Yeah.
oh look, this is a new thing that I need to figure out.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to kind of get from you, how you sort of unravel from all that stuff that is around.
Mm.
Keep this clean, this podcast. And at the same time, so you're unraveling from all of that. And now the other thing is, oh, I have completely forgotten who I am. You talk
Hmm.
about helping people unearth their unique magic. So
Mm.
a lot of people will say, like you just said, there's nothing special about me. I'm, I'm quite boring, really. Or I'm a bit out there. Nobody's really going to want to hear that. So where do you start with unlocking that place of self-doubt?
It's a good question. So this is something I feel like, so I created a sort of exercise. So I'll regale you with a tale. I don't know if I said this on the last podcast that we did. If I did, apologies, but stories are worth being retold. So I nearly lost my life 11 years ago. And so, I was learning to walk again after that, building myself back up physically. And then once I built myself back up physically after a month or more in the hospital and I was let back out into the world, I didn't quite realize I then had to do all of the work on rebuilding myself mentally and spiritually. I suddenly went, oh, because I had been effectively just the body, or I had felt like just a body for so long, I suddenly then had a moment where I was like, I have to sort of build all of this back up. And as a child, I was always at the museum. My grandmother was a friend of the museum, and it sort of meant that we were always there. Whenever we would go to see her every week, she would take us to this lovely little small museum, and we would go and look at all of the exhibits. They would hide little things in the exhibits for us to find, and we would absolutely love it. And I thought that for whatever reason, my mind was being all nostalgic as I was recovering, and I was musing on this idea of the museum and the exhibits and how it pieced together an entire history. And I thought to myself, maybe I should do that with me. If I'm going to have to rebuild somehow, why don't I build the Museum of Bee? So in my head, I have the Museum of Bee, and every single exhibit, every exhibition is, you know, a, a part of me that without it, it just wouldn't, I wouldn't make sense. I would not be me. So I would muse on maybe the music that I liked, or I would be like, oh, there would have to be like an exhibit that was like a library because I love books. Sometimes in my head, I'll be like, when you have like the sort of the special shows that come in and then go, those will be my new hyperfixations, where for some reason for 3 weeks you're absolutely obsessed with one thing and it comes and it goes. Sometimes it might stay, so then you put it in one of your current exhibitions in your head. And some people look at me like, okay, this is a bit out there, but I think it's a really useful exercise if you are going, who am I and how do I express that? Is to maybe actually, even if it's on like a piece of paper, whatever, build the museum of you. Think about all of those wonderful things that make up who you are as a person, even the things that people are like, oh, that makes you less than or makes you this, like I've got a disability and I'm damn sure going to have an entire exhibit that is just that, because without it, it's just not me. Build up this exhibit, all of these exhibits, build up this museum of you, and then look at how you can work on expressing those things. You might want to pick one of the exhibitions to write about. You can talk about one of your great loves. That might be a really good place to start in terms of helping you put words on the page. But I think find a little exercise like that that really just helps you to tap into who it is that you really are. And don't be afraid to then show up with all of that lovely, unique magic. That's how I phrase it, because essentially, all of your stories, all of your wonderful quirks, all of your wild madness, that isn't owned by anybody else, nor can they take it away from you, nor should we let them. So really let that be your starting point.
Wow. I'm a very visual thinker, and so I've literally got little ones inside your head now.
I knew the cogs would be whirring, Patricia, because I knew she'd be like,
yeah. And I've been to some good museums and bad museums, and the ones, I'm in a good museum here with the way you were
Mm,
laying it out. I love that, and I guess you could take that further, and there's the kind of uh not archive, the
yeah,
old stuff
yeah.
doesn't get put on display.
Yeah,
um
you've got the archives
yeah,
that might have been relevant to you, back then, and maybe they aren't part of, they aren't part of who you're presenting right now, but
yeah,
they still make a part of you, so you can have those, in the basement or whatever.
yeah. So some people think that yeah, it is. If I was to write, I'd probably be writing. Technically, I'd probably be writing as if I was speaking. It would be quite sort of dialogue-y, sort of almost. I don't know,
Mhm.
because that's the way I think. But if you're working with somebody, do you sort of, no, I was going to say make them. I'm sure you don't make anybody do anything. Do you do you encourage
Mm,
them to sort of really flip things around in terms of what they are currently seeing as them, the way they are, their sort of identity, what they think they have always been like, what people describe them as, and all the rest of it? Because is that one of the little danger traps that we potentially could fall into? Oh, this is the kind of way, like I've just said, oh, I would probably write like this.
hmm Well, for a lot of people that are kind of feeling a little bit anxious about putting the words together, I do say just record yourself speaking because that's one of the things that I do. When I go out on my morning dog walks, I am the woman that is talking to herself because I'm recording all of my meandering sort of thoughts because I think that's a really beautiful way of capturing your own voice, which you can then put into all of your work. And I think that's something that a lot of us fear is we read something we've written and we go, oh no, it sounds like I've written it. And I'm like, yes, that's the point. I want it to sound like you've written it. That's the beauty of your voice. That's the thing that's going to connect people to you. Like a lot of people, they don't come to me because they're like, oh, your writing is like Pulitzer Prize worthy or whatever. They're like, no, your writing has personality. It feels warm. It feels like I already had a billion conversations with you. Even the best writers, you're not going, oh, wow, that's so profound. You're going, oh, it made me feel this way. It connected with me on this. I related to this. So for a lot of people who go, oh, I'm really scared to sound like me, I'm like, one, I want you to, and maybe just start out by talking to yourself.
Yeah, I agree, because if I was helping somebody create a talk, for instance, it would be
Mm,
one of the things, exactly that exercise that I would give them. Just go and walk around the block and blabber into
yeah.
your mobile
Mhm,
phone voice app.
mhm,
Because then you can find the threads and you can find these little gems that have come out of your mouth, because you
mm.
don't remember them necessarily if you don't capture them, do you?
Yeah, oh gosh, no.
So,
Gosh,
so
no.
maybe always take a little notepad out with you.
Yep, I am holding up my notepad now because I basically like to have somewhere I can capture my thoughts because, like a lot of people, I have a lot of racing thoughts. Many creative people tend to be people with very loud, fast brains. So I like to try and have somewhere where I can capture something before I can sort of censor myself and be like, nah, no, that probably wouldn't work because of this reason, that reason. I even have a little dedicated notebook, and on the front of it, it says Bee's Ideas Book in brackets, some good, some painfully terrible. And then on the first page, I have a little disclaimer, be like, I am allowed to write really awful ideas that will never see the light of day in this notebook. And it's weird how psychologically my brain then goes, it's now safe to write stuff down in this notebook that might be rubbish because I've said to myself, it's allowed to be rubbish. Whereas if I didn't have that space, I would write nothing because I have to have a perfect thought to write down, if that makes sense.
Oh, it so makes sense. Yeah, I have to have perfect thoughts to write down. I love that. No, I know, give yourself permission to be absolutely rubbish. I mean, that's why you often get advised to maybe experiment with improv classes and things like that. It's
Yeah.
really hard because your natural instinct, if you walk into a room, you're not necessarily a performer, but somebody said, "Oh, this will sort you out. Go to an improv class," and you're sat
Yeah.
there absolutely sweating with fear. And the
Hmm.
reason you're sweating with fear is because you are now so inside your head thinking, I have to do something clever and original or
Yeah.
funny, or if it's that kind of improv, I have to be as good as they are. I have to be, so you're doing exactly the opposite of what improv is, which is being present in the moment, just kind of going
Yeah.
with the flow. But that voice just it's the same with writing, isn't it? I have to do something. I mean, whenever I've tried to do a video because I thought, oh, this would be clever, or this is a trend, or I could make a clever little metaphor analog, and one of
Mm-hmm.
those things out of this.
Mm-hmm.
It rarely works. I looked at it and think, oh my God, that's so contrived. And where are you in this? You don't do those kind of videos. So that's another thing, isn't it? Is avoiding the trap of, well, comparisonitis, I guess, but thinking um I've got to sort of follow this trend. You see it on
Yeah.
Instagram, don't you? All over the place. Suddenly somebody else is coming up with these little comedy sketchy things, and some of them do it brilliantly, and you're totally
Yeah.
hooked. But
I think
then the people you can tell the people who've just thought, oh, look, this is the way to do it, and yeah,
I think that's the sort of trap we fall into, isn't it? When our creativity, when we view it as if it were currency and we exchange it for views and things like that. I think when it becomes dictated by algorithms and other things like that, I think that's when it's no longer ours and we are just going to be expressing something other than ourselves because we are stuck in that sort of trap of being like, this is what everything else that tells me I should be creating. But I think creativity is yours to play with. A lot of people that come to me just say, I'm not creative. And I'll be like, okay, you are. But okay, I can understand why you would say you aren't, but you are. Everybody has creativity that they can play with. I think as kids, we understand that and we feel it and we embrace it and we just run and we go with it. But then as we get older, we tell ourselves, no, can't do that anymore. Sorry, forget that. Whereas actually, it's something that we should actually hold on to and be like, do you know what? I am allowed to express myself. And that's something that can be quite hard to do, especially if we've had experiences in our life where we've been made to feel as if the way we express ourselves is inherently wrong, or the way that we express ourselves, it makes us feel unsafe because it's much easier and safer for us to be quiet and make ourselves small. When you go through those experiences, when you experience trauma, all of that stuff can make it really hard to then come out of your shell and express yourself in some way. But I think it is about returning to maybe in our minds, returning to our youth and looking at all of the times where we would just express ourselves freely. Like, I don't know about you, but when I went to secondary school, I had a bag that was covered in the Tipex names of bands that I liked, so that if people walked past me, they could be like, oh, she likes that band. And that was a way of me expressing part of myself. I had, purple and blue hair. My entire life at that point was about going, I need everything to express who I am because I'm starting to find those parts of myself. And it's almost like you sort of awkwardly celebrate that stuff? So it's
Mm.
about finding those points in your life where expressing yourself felt really good and it helped you to find the right people. Because before I started expressing myself in a business sense on LinkedIn, I felt so incredibly lonely, so incredibly wrong. The minute I just started showing up as me, I find wonderful people like you who I can't even imagine not having in that space. I find the most kindred spirits possible who, without me showing up and just being myself, would have never wandered into my world. And I think how much better off I am for showing up as me and finding those people, you know?
Absolutely. And I guess with writing, I love the way you put all that, and the feeling is mutual. I had the exact opposite really experience during school, because that's hence for why that term self-squashing that I use
Yeah.
is so personal to me, and I know that it resonates because that was what I did for a huge portion of my life. And when I wasn't self-squashing, I was probably going up to the other extreme and doing fairly ridiculous things, but
Mm,
pretty much nearly self-sabotaging,
yeah.
because I found there was nowhere in the middle where I rested, because I was too conflicted about, it can't be who I am, oh, who am I,
Mm,
and all that stuff. So it
yeah.
is, so for those people who are on a journey, I would just like to say that I was probably, close to being in my late 50s and early 60s before I really figured this one out. So it's good if you can do it sooner. But
Yeah.
when I was growing up, we had no conversations like this existed. They were
Mm.
absolutely didn't exist.
I
So,
will I will
you know,
caveat what I said about my teen years by it was met with not the best reaction, so then I did just completely go inwards. And because I wasn't experiencing a time in my life where I did need to go inwards just to feel safe and comfortable. So I think for me, it's been in my yeah, it's only in recent years where I've realized, oh, it's okay to be me. And it's still something I'm learning, because I think a lot of people come to me because they want to find that creative confidence. And I make no secret of the fact that I don't feel as if I am a confident writer, but I don't think that makes me any less than, because show me somebody who is an entirely confident writer, and I think they might be lying, or I think they might be being fed things in their ear that maybe aren't quite true, because I find writing absolutely terrifying, you know? And I do it for a living, and I do it for myself, just for my own stuff. I write my own poetry and things like that. I find it absolutely terrifying. And if you were to be like, oh, be nice about your writing, I would be like, ah, ah, I had a class in university that was workshops where you had to hand out your stuff to the 30 odd people in the class and they had to read it. I didn't go to any of them. I just wouldn't turn up, because the thought of having to give my writing to other people to be assessed was so petrifying to me, which is hilarious considering that's now what I do, you know,
yeah, yeah, that
and
is
it
now what
fills
you
me
do.
with dread
Yeah.
every single time. And I think that's something I try and get across to people, because you can put people on pedestals and be like, well, look at them. They're expressing themselves so beautifully. People might be listening and be like, oh, but Trisha, everything that you write just feels so magnetic, because for me, whenever I read anything that you write, it just feels so you that I just think, well, how can she be anything but entirely confident in this? But then it's like you're sort of blind to everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Comparisonitis.
Yeah, which I've really worked on. Unfortunately, I think now pretty much got rid of. It'll never get rid of it. Of course, humans, we are wired to do all those silly things. That's just normal. So, and the other thing before we wrap up, because I'm gonna have to be really self-disciplined, is, I mean, I'm going through an Iris Murdoch phase. Okay. Now, I mean, some people will say, will pick up, my husband, for instance, picked up, he's an avid reader, way better. I'm really slow. But he picked it up, looked at the first couple of pages, no, I don't think so. Okay. Um, And a lot of people would do that. Other people would say, oh my God, yes, I love Iris Murdoch. Okay, not pretentiously, but just because they do.
Yeah.
And the same would apply to many, many authors. So my point being, which I suspect you would agree with, is you can't please everyone.
Yeah. And there's somebody out there who needs to hear what you've got to say. Even if you sort of say to yourself, nobody needs to hear what I have to say. They do. The things that you say and feel and think will resonate, and they'll create connection and communication. And they are beautiful. Your creativity is yours to play with. So, yes, even if you're not going to be for everybody, well done. You're not meant to be. When I write to attract and I write to repel, because there are a certain section of people that I do not want to have conversations with. And so I write in a very deliberate way so that if they were to stumble across anything I'd written, they would go, oh, that's not for me. I don't want to attract everybody, and neither do you. So
No.
don't worry about doing that.
Yeah. No, I agree. Brilliant. Oh, gosh, this is so difficult. This is already the second time I've had you on this podcast. I can already see the third time. In fact, why don't I just have you on every week and
We
we'll
need
just
we need a
chat?
joint
Yeah,
podcast. I'm telling you.
exactly. So, just sum up very beautifully in your way how, if people are listening to you and thinking, "Oh, I want more Bee," how, tell us a bit about your actual business.
So, I am a creative copywriter, content writer, and what I like to say, messaging mentor, if that makes any sense to anybody. I work with small business owners typically, and I help them to sort of stand out with more confident, heart-led copy and content. And I like to delve into their creative mindset a little bit as well. So that's what I'm usually up to. And if you wanted to find me, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can type in my name, Bee Higgins, and you will probably find me. I'm the one with all the flowers. But then I'm also on Instagram at Bloom with Bee Copy. So you can find me over there too. But I'm usually sharing stuff about, copy, content, creative mindset, but then also my little adventures around Somerset. I like to share those as well because it's all about world building, which, to be fair, we could fill an entire third podcast with. So maybe I'll come back next time to talk about just that.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm literally having to, I was going to say strangle myself, but that sounds like a whole nother podcast. Restrict myself from saying anything more because you are a delight to just chat with and just chat with. Oh, sorry, everybody out there. It is a podcast, and I know that this isn't just about us chatting because you will have got loads from it. So I'm going to wrap up with tears in my eyes and say thank you so much, Bee.
Thank you very much.
So just a reminder, if you're curious about this whole idea of self-squashing, then my website, trishalewis.com, has some resources on it. And of course, you've got all the other episodes to look back on of this podcast. My book, The Mystery of the Squash Self, my TEDx, Beware the Self-Squashing Prophecy. All of that stuff is there for you. Stay curious and unsquashed.